Tonight, though, we are here with Estelle Ford-Williamson, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for a good number of years. And she is going to have a good little talk about writing characters or building memorable and vibrant characters tonight. Estelle is the author of Abbeville Farewell, and she is also the co-author of Seed of South Sudan, Memoir of a Lost Boy Refugee. And more recently, her novel Rising Fawn came out this January. And we're very excited to have her here. And I'm very excited to hear about this talk because I do believe that building memorable and vibrant characters is the most important part of putting together a story. So Estelle, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Zach. I was
You're
just
very
thinking that we met and worked together. Georgia Center for the Book was the place where we debuted, had the Decatur or Atlanta debut of Seed of South Sudan, Memoir of a Lost Boy Refugee. That I worked with Majak Marrier, and I'll never forget that church full of people at First Baptist Church in Decatur. It was.
I will never forget the enormous smile on his face and how excited he was to be there. That was a wonderful, wonderful night. I remember it well.
It had been a long journey of his sitting down and me asking him to repeat things innumerable times. And he never grew impatient in 4 years of working together, never was impatient. So it was just a wonderful crowning moment for us to debut it there in Georgia, in Decatur, where so many of our supporters were. Thanks. Appreciate you doing that. Well, great. I'm so happy to be talking about characters who grow from the soil they're planted in, and that includes the geography or the circumstances they're in. I've been fortunate to receive some help and some in building those characters through my own writing groups and through writers I've worked with and had workshops with. So I hope this will be a help to you as you're trying to think of characters and make your characters something that people really are drawn to. I've had the good fortune of people saying they were drawn to my characters. One person in my first book said she knew my characters so well she felt she should send them Christmas cards. So that's pretty good. Not that they would have been able to do that since they were the 1800s and she was in the 2000s. But anyway, it's not only the soil where they plant their feet or where they're from, but what are their dilemmas and their passions, their ways of dealing with conflict. All of these things are part of the character that you're building. And many of us may recall, at least from the movie, Margaret Mitchell's incredible character, Scarlett O'Hara, holding up carrots from a field that she just gnawed. The carrots had just been the fields had just been run over by northern soldiers and armies, and they just crushed everything. So she's pulling up this one carrot that she can eat, and she says, by God, I'll never be hungry again because of all the travail she's gone through. A lot of us can't forget Serena in Ron Rash's novel by the same name. Within the first few pages, Serena has arrived in town on a train with her husband, and there is a workman at the big timber operations they're running in 1800s, early 1900s rather, North Carolina. And within a few minutes, the husband's girlfriend's father has a Bowie knife implanted in his belly by one of those people around him. It wasn't Serena, but it was at Serena's bidding. So we get the idea from the first pages that this is going to be a memorable character. And could she ever be found anywhere else but in this ragtag operation of a very difficult and dangerous operation in the North Carolina mountains around the original area that was became the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is doing some timed journaling, and we're going to get into what is the character like and what makes them so memorable in the first place. And if you don't mind, I'll read a little bit from Rising Fawn, which is my novel that came out in January. This particular section became a short story. It's part of a short story that was selected as a finalist for the Short Story America prize in 2017, excuse me. First of all, my main character, Claire Connor, never met a latte she didn't like. She drinks only premium coffee. She's a very successful life coach in Atlanta. But she loses her life. She knows it due to credit card identity theft. And then all of a sudden there's another major financial shock. And her husband, Willie, who she really thinks he's stepping out on her. She's not sure what's going on with him. He gets mad at not only the credit card theft, but there's another financial shock of someone's taken out a $200,000 home equity line and cashed it. And it's on their house and on their credit reports and on they're supposed to pay it. So he gets angry, kicks her out of the house. She has to go look for a place. By a series of circumstances that it turns out that her very secretive mother, who's actually in a semi-coma state, owns a piece of property on the Alabama side of Lookout Mountain. And she has to go up there in a search for a place to live, and also some business she thinks she can do up there as a life coach. So here's Claire arriving at a place along the way, up in the mountains of Northwest Georgia, outside of Cartersville, before you get up to Lookout Mountain area. Through a heavy coating of mist on her windows, she made out gas pumps in a store, actually a small frame house converted to a store on the right side of the road. She decided to pull in and adjust the heating and defrost buttons so that she could clear the car windows. She nudged the car into the gravel parking lot, avoiding the two gas pumps, and pulled in as straight as she could to avoid the other cars parked just like second and third thoughts near the station's door. Immediately, she wished her car was not a bright yellow. What the hell, she said to the fog-bound car. Might as well go in and wait out the rain. She pushed open a glass door almost solid with poster ads for ammo, a rodeo, and a church bake sale, among others. As the door opened, she heard a clear bell above at the door, jangling excitedly. Inside, she felt warmth and hugged her chilled body. Come in, dearie, it's miserable outside. A low, hoarse voice hailed her as she stood wondering where to go next. Beyond the displays of crackers, cookies, and paper diapers heaped at the front of the store, she saw the counter to the right. A rough-looking tan blonde woman in a denim shirt leaned on a cash register behind the counter, smoking a cigarette. Sitting in front and just to Claire's right, a line of stools on which she saw the large, rounded backs of 4 men hunched over the slab. Great day for tucks and hogs, the woman yelled cheerily. What can I get you? Directions? A beer? We got several brands. Just name your passing. Claire brushed the rain from her sweatered arms and walked over toward the woman, carefully avoiding the men's massive backs. None of them looked at her until she'd drawn up to the counter near the woman. She felt eyes cutting toward her. What'll it be? The woman asked again. I just wanted to get out of the weather for a moment, Claire said. Is this expected to go long? That bar weather ain't going to make it over Taylor's Ridge, so you might as well just set a spell, the man nearest the storekeeper growled. Of course, you just crossed over Dick's Ridge, but you didn't know that. Taylor's, Dick's. Claire was confused. Then she realized they were messing with her. Yeah, ain't going to be any real estate deals going on in this kind of weather, said the man next to him, a face barely visible under his baseball cap. Take a load off, honey. Don't let them boys bother you, honey, the woman said, leaning harder on the cash register and dragging on her cigarette. They ain't very good company. I'd take my old pigs next to them, only I ain't got them no more. Claire heard mumbles and guffaws from that side. The 4 were all drinking long necks and all wearing ball caps, except for the first one wearing a fishing hat. They wore T-shirts displaying different graffiti. The shirt so old, Claire couldn't make out the words. They think I'm kidding, the woman said, but I'm not. Claire smelled what she thought was chicken feed mixed in with the scent of tobacco and beer. She wondered if she should buy rat poison or some such protection for the mountain house she was going to. She decided to wait on that. Do you by any chance have any coffee? She asked tentatively. The first man let out a big laugh. Do you mean truck stop special cankered coffee? I know old Cheryl's got some of that, ain't you, Cheryl? Never you mind, Cheryl said, stubbing out her cigarette. She flung the man a dirty look as she went to the far end of the counter and brought back a stained decanter nearly empty of coffee. That's fine, Claire said. I'll take a cup. Do you have cream? Cheryl gave her the pot, and Claire could see brown streaks in the glass and nodded her head toward the end of the counter where cups, powdered creamer, and sugar holders stood next to the coffee maker. Help yourself. Claire looked around at stacks of moon pies in front of the coffee counter. There were boxes and boxes of them, the vanilla and chocolate she knew as a child, and the many varieties since: banana, orange, strawberry. Ugh, strawberry, she couldn't imagine. She poured herself some of the overheated coffee and turned up the creamer package to whiten the blackness and hopefully help it go down better. She sipped and choked. Yeah, told you it was cankered. The man at the fishing hat laughed. So that's the first step into the store, fishing bait, ammo store, bar, grocery store, they'll say that. That is this little store by the side of the road run by Cheryl. As you listen to the characters being introduced or speaking, what was memorable about any of them? The voices, for one thing. Fortunately, you can tell I'm going to use some difference in the voices so that they speak differently. As a writer, what did the writer do that stayed with you? Think about that. There was a lot of physical description. That was really important. But also the actions. There's already a tension set up about, she's from the city and these people are obviously from there. They're smoking, they're drinking beer, they're in their element. And here comes this other person who looks like she's straight out of at least Atlanta magazine. So there's already some conflict starting. By the way, that the first guy is already teasing her about, well, you don't know where you are. And you obviously don't know anything about the weather, because you would know that Taylor's Ridge is high enough that it's going to keep the weather on that side of the ridge. And then, of course, she doesn't know the names of any of the other ridges. And they're already letting her know that she's interested in real estate, and that you can feel already there's a sense of conflict over that. These guys do not look like they are in the real estate business. Okay, so we're already noticing some of the things that go on. Where are some of the things? What are some of the ways that writers come up with these characters? Well, the first thing is they look around. They look around them. I troll people on Facebook. I'm not talking about really misbehaving with them. I just follow these stories. I find them really fascinating. I'll go into one in just a minute. That's where some of my characters come from. These particular characters came from a location far from the Corduroy Mountains and ridges of northwest Georgia. Where this actually takes place is where Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee come together. And there are a series of mountains and ridges that crowd up in that corner of Georgia. It was actually a one-stop light town in Central Florida, somewhere between Gainesville and Jacksonville. That was my inspiration for the store. There was a store that started out there during the Great Depression and had been meeting the needs of fishermen and hunters and tourists and locals for a long, long time. When I visited, I saw all these stuffed bobcats and bears and alligators and snakes, and I just knew this store needed to be in my novel. Oh, and those four backs were there too. The black shirted men hunched over their long necks made me think of who my character Claire would encounter on her way up to Lookout Mountain. So while it was set and the inspiration was in Florida, I just knew it had to be in a story. And as I said, the short story based on it was a finalist for the 2017 Short Story America Prize. The editor said he thought Cheryl belonged in the movie. Cheryl, we'll find out later, is probably a trans. She is male, but she has a male voice, but a female body. And the way the guys talk about her, you're beginning to realize they don't know if she's Cheryl or Earl. So that will be a source of a little bit of conflict in that story. So what are if we go back, some of the elements of characters who grow from the soil or the situation they're growing up in, that they're planted in. Lots of physical detail. Notice I used denim, the blonde, tan skin. You know, we might look at that and think, oh, well, she must work in the yard a lot, or maybe she goes to the pool on the weekend. But we get a glimpse that she runs pigs. So she has, or she has in the past. The men's hats, you know, ball caps are perennials, but there's always somebody who's different. Not all of them are going to wear the same hats. Hard to read graffiti tells us that, you know, there's some kind of sentiments they're wanting to express, but maybe they've been washing those shirts a number of times. And then the stained decanter, I like that. I remember the detail of an experience I had like that when I was serving at a soda shop when I was before I went to college. The moon pie detail, that's just thrown in there because that's going to be there. There are going to be all kinds of moon pies. The immediate challenge to the stranger, that's another physical detail of, you know, she's not from there. The chicken feed and the smell of chicken feed and beer all mixed together. The second thing, besides there being lots of physical detail, the conflicts are homegrown. The conflict about the pigs, there's going to be more about that in the story. But this is one of the things that's being displaced. The farms are being displaced. And the complaint is, you know, these are the people who complain about the pigs are the ones that are wanting to go down for the barbecue on Saturday night. So it's kind of hard. You know, there's a definite conflict going on. The conflict of is she Cheryl or Earl? That'll be coming up. So elements of characters who grow from the soil. First is lots of physical detail. Second is their conflicts are homegrown. And then they are in the story. The third point is they are in the story to wow the reader. The reader needs to be following it along, not knowing what's going to happen at one moment or the other. We don't know what's going to happen with Claire in this case. Is she going to have some interchange with the guys there? Are they going to give her a hard time? Are they going to try and get rough with her over, you know, she's from Atlanta, and or is the incident is it going to be just such a quick thing and have no impact on her whatsoever? Hopefully she's not going to need any gas. She's got to get up to before dark up to the side of the mountain. So the third thing about they're in the story to wow the reader. I wanted to read just briefly in terms of when the reader opens the pages and starts reading about these amazing characters, you get a sense of the wow, I think, at least in this case. I'm reading from Where the Crawdads Sing. I think it was one of the more surprising books to come along in many a year. And I think because it was such a wow experience for people, that's one of the reasons it was so popular. So this is from the chapter 12, Pennies and Grits, 1956. For weeks after Pa left, Kaya would look up when ravens cawed. Maybe they'd seen him swing stepping through the woods. At any strange sound in the wind, she cocked her head, listening for somebody, anybody. Even a mad dash from the truant lady would be a good sport. Mostly she looked for the fishing boy. A few times over the years, she'd seen him in the distance, but hadn't spoken to him through the marsh. He was the only soul who she knew in the world besides jumping and a few sales ladies. Wherever she glided through the waterways, she scanned for him. One morning, as she motored into a cord grass estuary, she saw his boat tucked in the reeds. Tate wore a different baseball cap and was taller now, but even from more than 50 yards, she recognized the blonde curls. Kaya idled down, maneuvered quietly into long grass, and peered out at him. Working her lips, she thought of cruising over, maybe asking if he had caught any fish. That seemed to be what Pa and anybody else in the marsh said when they came across somebody. Anything biting? Had any nibbles? But she only stared, didn't move. She felt a strong pull toward him and a strong push away, the result being stuck firmly in this spot. Finally, she eased toward home, her heart pushing against her ribs. Every time she saw him, it was the same, watching him as she did the herons. So we're discovering this story is about a woman, a young girl, not a woman. She grows to be a woman, but a young girl who grows to be a woman by herself in the marsh. And it seems so amazing that something like that can happen. This is in the 1950s, when maybe there wasn't as much development, but that just the fact that there are these places still where something like this could conceivably happen, wows us. It's a wow sort of thing. We're just amazed. So the rest of the story is about her growing up and the conflict she comes into. But you can tell from the way the character is drawn, the side swing stepping through the woods, is how she describes her pa's gait as he goes through the woods. She's describing who would know. The only soul in the world she knew, besides jumping and a few sales ladies, was her dad. So she's missing him and trying to reach out to somebody who can kind of tell her about her world. She knows she's going to need some help at different times, but she's also very cautious. So she's kind of fascinated by this person. Delia Owens, the author, is filling us with physical details and with situations. Talk about a situation that's grown from the soil or from the water. She's in a situation because she has nobody to talk to or nobody to get help from, income from, ways of eating to sustain herself. She doesn't have a way of sustaining herself, so she's going to need some help. So that's one of the people I look at in terms of, wow, this is a character that will be really fascinating. Some people have wondered, well, where the crawdads sing, Delia Owens. It sounds so far-fetched, that could never happen. But I just happen to have been, in my own reading, coming across Untamed, the story of the wildest woman in America, and the fight to save Cumberland Island, which is the story of Carol Rook-Deshelle by Will Harlan. And it came out maybe a couple of years before where the crawdads sing did, but it's a nonfiction, and it's a true story about this woman who has been on Cumberland Island. She, as a young girl growing up in Dunwoody, figured out early on that she was going to live by her wits. She was not going to be depending on income from a job. She just loved being outdoors, especially in the caves above the Chattahoochee River. And she vowed and carried out her vow to be able to study nature and see it close at hand. And she has been on Cumberland Island for quite a number of years, observing it and helping preserve it for as a national park, and then as a national seashore, and then continuing the efforts to keep development from coming there. So some of the things that happen in Where the Crawdads Sing, the significant main action in the back of the book, at the end of the book, and actually happens almost 3/4 of the way through. The same thing happened with Carol Rook-Deshelle. There was a body, and the fact that actually happened in both stories is kind of interesting. They didn't know each other, I'm pretty sure. They come from a different background totally. But these kinds of things can happen. People do still be off the grid, and they live a different life. So those are the wow factors that I was talking about. So in your own writing, I said, you want to think about a character that you want to write about. And I'll ask you to just, it may be somebody who, sometimes it's helpful just to close your eyes as I'm asking you these questions. Just think of memorable people you knew growing up. It might have been a relative, or it might have been the odd, very withdrawn kid in your class who just amazed you when many years later he showed up at the high school reunion and he'd become this totally different person. outgoing or successful, or maybe the reverse happened. The football hero fell on hard times. His homecoming queen wife divorced him and he never recovered. Who are the characters that you want to write about? Or are there people out there that you can think of that you want to write about in a fictional way? Maybe you've been on Facebook or scrolled through an interesting news feed and there's a story of someone finding out his father was not his father, but there's a different person who's now known to be the dad. Parent not expected, they call it in the DNA test results people send off for. So whether this person was someone you knew or read about, what's memorable about that person or that situation? I think a lot could be said, a lot could be written about this different stories where people are finding out through DNA testing. That's very regularly done now, that the results show that their parents are not who they thought they were, or that they had these amazing other relatives. So there's a story there. So on this, close your eyes and think about the person you want to write about. And think about what are their physical characteristics? What are some things you could say about them? Where they wear a certain kind of clothing, or other people wear a certain kind of clothing, but they're doing something the opposite. Or maybe they dress differently. Or maybe their clothing is not the same quality or the same, showing the same amount of income as somebody else. Or maybe they've got more income. What are the qualities and the physical characteristics that character is showing? Okay. What are some of the things that he or she would say? What are some of the things that he or she's concerned about? It can be a parent who's got teenagers and all of a sudden the kid who used to be all ready to do things with the family and helpful and all the ways that kids can be such a joy, then all of a sudden there's sullenness and stay out of my room and all the things that kids do. So be thinking again with your eyes closed or just with a pen in hand, just thinking about it. What are some things that you could say about the situation that your character is in? Is he or she in midlife? Is it a man who has a lot of experience in various ways, maybe very successful in certain things, but has this blind spot, a blind spot that comes from a childhood of deprivation or mental abuse or physical abuse. And somehow it's worked its way into this work situation where he has to do or die and not being able to get in touch with, not being able to handle the feelings of abuse and unworthiness that come from being an abused child or starting to overcome him. So take a few minutes and journal about this person. When I say journal, I just write out anything I can about the person. And when I was writing my first novel, particularly, I spent a lot of time journaling what the time was like. They were characters who were growing up in what became Atlanta. It wasn't even Marthasville at the time, but a 13-year-old in that environment. It's all trees, and he's doing a lot of heavy work, felling trees and building cabins and things like that. He's got a lot on his mind. And who was in the neighborhood, but one of the people who has been in proximity across the river, across the Chattahoochee, is a young Cherokee boy, a half-breed as he would be called. His father is American or English, and his mother is Cherokee. So what this energizes the kid, the young 13-year-old, and all the things that they're into, the curiosity and the building things for themselves, becomes immersed in this boy who he begins to play with secretly, because he knows that his father would not go for it. There's some history there. But anyway, journal about that person just for a moment or two. Write notes about your main character. What is he or she like? What's their milieu? What's their world like? What are their conflicts? What are the issues? Okay. I don't see any questions coming up specifically yet, but what I would like to do is to talk a little bit more about the sources of our characters and where they come from, and the inspirations. I mentioned, a trip I took to North Florida and how it ended up in North Georgia, the story of that. But there's so many situations that come up that over time, if you're paying attention, they can become real jumping off points for stories. Let's put it that way. I've been getting one lately. There've been signals coming through that, Estelle, you need to write about this. So I probably will. The characters who are in Rising Fawn back in that store will probably emerge again. And they'll probably emerge over an issue that I think is not humorous, but it's kind of a sign of our time. I was on Facebook. I was supposed to be preparing for a workshop, and I just got captivated by something I'll show you in a moment here when I share a screen. It's a picture, and this was on Facebook. It was identified as 3 cougars on a lawn at Kiowa Island. Okay, cougars. Cougars are like mountain lions. People call them mountain lions. They're also known as panthers, the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers get their name from the panther, or people in the old days used to call them painters. But they're leopards. They're cougars, and they're a very large cat. It's not a bobcat. This one over here might be the size of a bobcat, but the photographer alleged that they were cougars, and they're on the lawn of a home in Kiowa. Now, I'm not sure if that actually happened. I was circulated on the internet. Where did we get these ideas that something we see is something that people say it can't be? And all I can think is, it's got to be I'm going to work it into a story somehow, because I had a friend in the North Georgia mountains who was telling me that she had actually seen a cougar as she was out running her regular thing up on top of Lookout Mountain near Lula Lake, which is in my book. The Lula Lake is in my book. And at first I thought, no, she couldn't have seen any cougar. But, here's a picture. And who knows? They're supposed to not be around anywhere on the East Coast. I know they are out in Texas, out in the plains. They're around. They're in the mountains in the Western Rockies. But this just, especially on Kiowa Island, I wonder. I don't know. Could it be? When I went to the website that sponsored it, it is Charleston Municipality, which Charleston is a large municipality that includes Kiowa Island. And that said the website was run by Libertarian South Carolinians, Libertarians of Charleston. And I thought, maybe they are just trying to pull my leg. But anyway, our leg. Anyway, there it is. So there they are. And here's someone that I know saying that she saw one. And in the very same area where she saw a cougar, I did see a bobcat, my only bobcat, on a visit some years ago. It was just like this large cat going over a rise down to the river, down to the water, the rushing water. Didn't have a long tail, just a bobtail, which is why they call it a bobcat. And it is smaller. It's definitely smaller than a cougar. About 3 times the size of a cat. The cougar is going to be like 10 times the size of a cat. So where do we get stories? From things like that. I knew that, so I'm going to be tracking cougars for a while. And my character, I'll create a character who's got some cougar tracking in their background. It's worth fun because a lot of people will say, you'll never see those, but then maybe my book's going to be kind of a fantasy too. So who knows? Maybe it'll be a part of a tall tale, all right. Okay, so that where people get their stories. Another place we get our stories, our amazing stories, is from other writers. I'm not saying adapt these writers and take their story, but this gave me an idea. Just the name of the story strikes me as something that you could really go a long ways with. It's called Show and Tell. Show and tell in school, you never know what the kids are going to come up with, right? Well, George Singleton, who is a master at coming up with wacky characters, has come up with a guy who's going to be involved in show and tell. And he has a certain way with his imagination. I'll just read. I wasn't old enough to know that my father couldn't have obtained a long lost letter from famed lovers Eloise and Peter Abelard. And since European history wasn't part of my third grade curriculum, I really felt no remorse in bringing the handwritten document on lined and hole punched blue horse filler paper, announcing its value and reading it to the class on Friday's show and tell. My classmates, who would all later grow up to be idiots, in my opinion, since they feared anything outside of South Carolina in general, and my hometown of 45 in particular, thus making them settle down exactly where they got trained, thus shrinking the gene pool even more. My classmates brought the same, the usual. Starfishes and conch shells bought in Myrtle Beach gift shops, though claimed to have been found personally during summer vacation. Indian head pennies given as birthday gifts by grandfathers. The occasional pet gerbil, corn snake, or tropical fish. My father instructed me how to read the letter, what words to stress, when to pause. I, of course, protested directly after the dry run. Some of the words and phrases reached beyond my vocabulary. The general tone of the letter I knew would only get me playground taunted by boys and girls alike. My father told me to pipe down and read louder. He told me to use my hands better and got out a metronome. I didn't know that my father, a quote, widower, unquote, is what he instructed me to call him, though everybody knew how mom ran off to Nashville and hadn't died, had once dated Ms. Subert, my teacher. My parents' past never came up with conversation, even after my mother ended up attending bar at a place called the Merchant's Lunch on Lower Broad, more often than she sang on various honky-tonk stages, waiting for representation by a man who would call her the next Patsy Cline. No, the prom night and homecoming of my father's senior year in high school with Miss Subert never leaked out in our talks, whether we ate supper in front of the television screaming at Walter Cronkite or played pinball down at the Sunken Gardens Lounge. I got up in front of the class. I knew that a personal, caring, loving, benevolent God didn't exist, seeing as I had prayed that my classmates would spill over their allotted time, et cetera, and then we'd go to recess, lunch, and then sit down through one of the mandatory film strips each South Carolina elementary school student underwent weekly on topics as tragic and diverse as friendship, fire safety, personal hygiene, and bee stings. I have a famous letter written from one famous person to another famous person, I said. Ms. Suber held her mouth in a tiny O. Nowadays, I realize that she held beauty, but at the time, she was just another very old woman in front of an elementary school class, her corkboard filled with exclamation marks. She wasn't but 35, really. Ms. Suber motioned for me to edge closer to the music stand she normally used on recorder day. And what are these famous people's names, Mendel? Ricky Hutton, who'd already shown off a ship in a bottle that he didn't make, but said he did, yelled out, "My father has a letter from President Johnson's wife thanking him for picking up litter." "My grandma sent me a birthday card with a $2 bill inside," said Libby Belcher, the dumbest girl in class, who later went on to get a doctorate in education, then become superintendent of the school district. I stood there with my folded document. Mrs. Suber said, "Go on." I forget who wrote this letter. I mean, they were French people. Might it be Napoleon and Josephine? Mrs. Suber wore a smirk that I would often see in my life from women who immediately recognized any untruth I chose to tell. I said, my father told me, but I forgot. It's not signed or anything, which was true. Ms. Suber pointed at Billy Gilliland and told him to quit throwing his baseball in the air, a baseball supposedly signed by shoeless Joe Jackson, that none of us believed in, seeing as the signature was printed at best. We never relented on Gilliland, and later on, he plain used the ball in pickup games until the cover wore off. I folded the letter and read, "My dearest." These were French people writing in English, I suppose, Miss Suber said. I nodded. I said, they were smart, I believe. I want to tell you that if I live to be 100, I won't meet another man like you. If I live to be 100, there shall be no love to match ours. The entire class began laughing, of course. My face reddened. I looked at Mrs. Suber, but she concentrated on her shoe. That guy who wrote How Do I Love Thee poem, that How Do I Love Thee poem has nothing on us, my sugar booger baby. That's enough, Miss Suber belted out. You can sit down, Mendel. So there's another character, a wow character who could inspire your own characters. Think about your own show and tell, get your imaginations going. Think about the interminable show and tells you probably went through or your kids went through. And what were some of the squirreliest things that happened? What would, with your imagination going on that, you can get into a character who becomes something from a show and tell if you want to make it a magical a story involving magical realism. So those are some of the writers that I encourage you to read and ideas to pick up. The ideas of the ways to make sure your characters are closely drawn, so real that they couldn't have been born anywhere else. They couldn't have been from anywhere else, where their conflicts are grown from the ground that they're in or the waters they're in. Lots of physical detail. Conflicts are homegrown, and something wow, just really wow going on with them. With that in mind, I really want to encourage you to take those three concepts of lots of physical detail, the conflicts are homegrown, and they're in the story to wow the reader. Take it to heart and be journaling some ways that you can create wow in the story that you're writing. And what better way to get some wow in your stories than to have some wow experiences. I feel fortunate being where I am, and I could do this in Atlanta, where I was from for a number of years, quite a number of years, and I can do it in here in the Beaufort area as well. When I was in Atlanta, I would very often walk around Stone Mountain. That was not too far from my home, and that was a wow experience that would really get me thinking. Not to mention, there's so many natural plants and heirloom plants growing by the side of the road, and elephant magnolias and things that are just so reminiscent. You're real close to an original Indian trail, a Cherokee trail over the mountain or around the mountain. So you have all kinds of things to spur your imagination, depending on what you're writing about. In the area where I am now, there's always nature. There's always something going on with the birds around our ponds or close to the water where we live. So there's unlimited opportunities to go out and watch nature and work them into your stories, as I often do. But having a wow experience in some areas is really the key to having the kinds of stories that will resonate with people. I just wanted to show you a few things that I look at on the internet or other places, try and get in touch with, just to make sure that. And then this is the bottom of the undercarriage of a '56 Buick convertible. It is it's one that they didn't pull out. They actually pulled the when an effort was made to turn the Lula Lake and Lula Lake Falls on the west brow of Lookout Mountain, this beautiful natural area that is just amazing. You'll read about it in the book, and you can look up Little Lake Land Trust, and you'll see some of the beauty of this place. It's on the, like I said, on the west side of the mountain. It was isolated for years. It was former coal mining area. And I used to go there as a child, and we didn't see these cars thrown off the side, but we learned later that when the people bought the area and turned it into a conservancy area, they pulled 200 car carriages out. They had been run off the bluff right over Little Lake Falls by car stripper gangs that grew up in the 60s around the mountains. They would go to the new shopping centers in the out in the Brainerd area and steal cars and strip them for their parts, sell the parts, and run the rest of the car off the bluff. So this was one that was left. I saw it while walking and hiking around the falls. Here's a wow experience for me. I get on the internet, and all of a sudden somebody's posted a sign, a picture of something gorgeous, something absolutely gorgeous, like a painted bunting or something with incredible colors. When I see the Dublin Library, the public library in Dublin, Ireland, I'm just swept away. I just can't imagine that many books in such a rich environment. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of wow. Are you wowed? Do you have that sense of wonder that you get from some of these scenes? As you think about your characters, as you think about your story, does it turn you on like these pictures? This is a picture of Savage Gulch, Tennessee. It's areas that you can only hike into. They're not available by cars mostly. But there are places like this not far from where this area of Little Lake and Lookout Mountain are. And here's some waterfalls from that same Savage Gulch area. Okay, so that's my bid. That's what I encourage people to do, is always create that sense of wonder about your characters when you are trying to feel for what your characters will do and what they can do that's really amazing. Go out in nature, go hear a really beautiful classical concert, get wowed by someone's musical talents, and let that lift you into that sphere of really coming up with some creative characters who wow the reader. Characters who wow you. If you're wowed, then your reader's going to be wowed too. Okay, Zach, do we have any questions at this point? Anybody have any questions?
I do not see any in the chat or the Q&A yet.
Okay. Well, if you've got time, what kinds of things do you do for wow when you're trying to really reach beyond what you've written and go into something deeper?
Well, when I'm digging into characters, a lot of what I try to do to make them memorable and stand out have to do with motivations and backgrounds. So what it is that makes that character more unique than any other character in the story, and then that could be just a sort of background from where they come from or what they've been through, any kind of previous trauma or anything like that, because the things that we experience as we go on tend to shape us and how we behave in situations going forward. So for me, it all always with characters stems from little 5-year-old me walking around asking why. Cool. Every single time something comes up, why does a character react that way? Why do they think that way? Why are they there? Why would they not want to be somewhere else, whatever it happens to be? So when I feel like I have those questions answered enough, then I'm comfortable with my characters.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I love characters who just go against everything that you think is going to happen to them. They just surprise them with their resiliency, or they've got a different take on things. It's just amazing to me how you can create characters who are so memorable. Mostly they're memorable because they do something that's totally different from what we think they're going to do.
Yeah.
I was going to mention, there've been several writers I've been talking about, but two of the books that I wanted to mention too. One Good Mama Bone by Bryn McLean. Talk about somebody who's going to do something contrary to what she was brought up. She was told she didn't have one good mama bone. And so when she ends up with a baby in her hands, it's all bets are off about what she can do with that baby. It's another question.
Oh, I was just dropping a link in there.
The other one was All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Dewar. For people who are interested in characters who are not Southern by any means, but they definitely grow out of the soil they were planted in. A young man who learns radio craft, how to make radios just by using wire and some coils in Germany when he's a young man, no possessions whatsoever. It's just amazing, and where that takes him is another story. But just be wowed. Just go out and be wowed.
Yeah. And I kind of like what you were. I also love that you use the word trolling in terms of going out and trying to watch people. I've always found that if I'm looking for a unique identity of a character, the best thing I can do is go find somewhere to sit. And you can almost start doing this again and just watch people in a very non-creepy kind of way. Keep track of what they're doing and their mannerisms, how they use their hands, or whether they're looking at people when they're talking, or is their foot going when they're talking. Are they actually listening? All those little pieces of what makes a person whole are very, very invaluable when it comes to writing about them.
The same thing can be said about dialogue. There's a part, I won't take the time because we don't have time, but in One Good Mama Bone, she's in a crisis situation in the first 5 pages of the book. And they're both country women, but you don't hear, well, you got to do this, you're going to do that. It's plain English, but it's shortened and it has certain emphases, but there's not a vernacular, so to speak. And that's refreshing. And just using as few words as possible, but making them the key words is really key. The important words and just going back and cutting as much as you can is the key to dialogue. And don't use those tags all the time. You don't always use tags. So
no, if you with the dialogue, if you can make your character identifiable, then those tags become a lot less necessary. And by tags, of course, we mean he said, she said kind of things.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be on Broadleaf Writers Association right now. It was very easy to communicate with other people about it being on, because it was, you just put in right now and it popped up. It was really cool.
Yes, yeah, and thank you. I'm very happy to have had you here, and I apologize earlier. My internet cut out, so I guess in the middle of talking in our intro, I must have just dropped off. But the program went on. When I came back, you were already talking, so that's good. So, but I'm very grateful to have you here, and wonderful conversation, and definitely for those of you who are here. I did drop all these links into the live stream on Facebook as well. So if you want to follow the links once this program's over, if you haven't already, to follow up on those books that Estelle mentioned, just go to our Facebook page and the video will be there in the archive. And I'll also be editing the video and adding it to our YouTube channel afterwards, so that you get the more condensed version of everything that we went through tonight.
Great.
So, but
you were quick on that.
Well,
you think you used to work in a library?
I may have, yes.
Good technology, and as a media, you weren't a media specialist, but you were surrounded by people who were, and you had to be.
Yes.
You had to be quick.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Absolutely. Yep. All right. Well, Estelle, thank you. And I look forward to having you with one of our programs again in the future. And I look forward to reading Rising Fawn. And
thank you. Looking forward to Weight of Ashes too.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to having it out in the world. But as always, much success to you. And I hope that we talk again soon.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, Estelle. Bye-bye.